The final bill for Isabella's album was a little over $32,000, and when I slid it across the console, she just laughed. She told me I should be grateful that a star like her had graced my pathetic little studio with her presence, and that the exposure was my real payment. The next day, when I sent a formal invoice, the first of her attack-odd social media posts went live, and my world started to unravel. My studio, Resonance, wasn't pathetic. It was my life. I'd poured every penny I had, and a few I didn't, into making it a haven for musicians. I'd spent years learning my craft, obsessing over acoustics, collecting vintage microphones, and mastering the subtle art of turning raw sound into polished emotion. It was small, sure, tucked away in a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town, but it had character. It had a soul, and for a while it was thriving. I worked with local bands, aspiring rappers, and even did some Foley work for indie films. I wasn't getting rich, but I was paying my bills doing what I loved, and that felt like winning the lottery. Then Isabella Vance walked in. Izzy, to the city, she was an indie darling, a faux pop princess with a voice like honey and a girl next door charm that was pure, calculated fiction. Her songs were all about authenticity and vulnerability, which, I would soon learn, was the biggest joke of all. She'd heard about my studio through the grapevine, specifically about a vintage plate reverb unit I'd painstakingly restored. She wanted that authentic, retro sound for her new album, the one that was supposed to launch her into the stratosphere. For the first few weeks, it was a dream. She was charming, complimentary, and seemed genuinely passionate about the music. She'd bring coffee for me in the mornings and talk about her artistic vision. I bought into the whole act. I was a fan. I poured my heart and soul into her project, working 16-hour days, meticulously editing every breath, tuning every harmony, and layering sounds until each track was a tapestry of audio perfection. We spent 2 months on that album. 2 months of my life, my skills, my electricity, my equipment. The 32 grand wasn't just a number, it was rent, it was equipment leases, it was my food, it was my future. Her laughter in that moment was the coldest sound I'd ever heard, colder than the dead silence of an anechoic chamber. It wasn't a giggle, it was a dismissal, a declaration that my time, my talent, my life's work was worthless. "Don't be so dramatic, Leo," she'd said, waving a dismissive hand, her silver bracelets jangling. "This album is going to be huge. The credit you'll get is worth more than this silly little invoice." I was stunned into silence. I'd trusted her. We had a contract, a simple one, but it was there. I thought she was a fellow artist. But I wasn't an artist to her. I was a help. When her social media assault began, it was brutal and efficient. She never named me directly at first, just vague posts about unprofessionalism and being taken advantage of by greedy people in the industry. Her fans, a rabid legion she called her Vance Guard, filled in the blanks. My studio's online pages were flooded with one-star reviews. People I'd never met accused me of everything from shoddy work to sexual harassment. Izzy, the sweetheart, fanned the flames with carefully worded comments, playing the victim. "It's so hard when you pour your heart into your art and people try to exploit you," she wrote, racking up thousands of likes. "I'm just so disappointed." I tried to fight back. I posted my side of the story, screenshots of the contract, of her texts praising the mixes. It didn't matter. Her followers descended like a swarm of locusts, reporting my posts, my accounts, until they were taken down. They called me a liar, a clout chaser, a bitter nobody trying to ride her coattails. In the court of public opinion, the verdict was in, and I was guilty. The fallout was catastrophic. Bands I had scheduled canceled their sessions, their deposits refunded. New inquiries dried up completely. No one wanted to be associated with the guy who supposedly tried to screw over the city's beloved Isabella Vance. The phone stopped ringing. The silence in my studio became deafening. Within 3 months, I was dead in the water. I couldn't make rent on the space. The eviction notice felt like a death certificate. I had to sell off my gear piece by painful piece to cover my debts. Each microphone, each compressor, each guitar I sold felt like I was selling a part of my own body. The plate reverb unit she'd coveted, the one that started it all, was the last to go. The day the buyers loaded it onto their truck, I sat on the curb and just stared at the empty space where my life used to be, feeling nothing but a hollow, ringing void. My reputation was shot, my business was gone, and my passion felt like a cruel joke. I was ruined, and Isabella Vance was on the cover of a local magazine, smiling. Hitting rock bottom is a funny thing. There's a terrifying clarity in having nothing left to lose. For a month I drifted. I crashed on a friend's couch, worked dead-end cash jobs, and drank cheap whiskey while Izzy's songs started getting radio play. Every time I heard her voice, that voice I had painstakingly crafted, layered, and polished, a hot, metallic rage would rise in my throat. Her success was built on my failure. Her fame was fueled by my ruin. She hadn't just stolen money from me, she'd stolen my name, my future, and she was getting away with it. The desire for justice, or maybe just good old-fashioned revenge, started as a low hum in the back of my mind and grew into a roaring crescendo. But how could a broke, discredited audio engineer fight a local celebrity with a PR team and an army of online fanatics? A lawsuit was out of the question. I couldn't afford a lawyer to buy a cup of coffee, let alone take on someone like her. I couldn't fight her in the public square. I'd already lost that battle spectacularly. I had to fight her in my arena. The one place where I was the expert. The world of sound. The idea came to me late one night, scrolling through my phone in the dark. It was a live video from one of her recent shows, a big outdoor concert in the city park. She was on stage, bathed in purple light, emoting for all she was worth. The crowd was singing along, mesmerized. But I wasn't looking at her. I was looking at the tech crew. I was watching the front-of-house engineer at the massive soundboard, the monitor engineer side stage, the A/V guys running cables. And I was listening. Really listening. Her live vocals were perfect. Too perfect. Every note was spot on. Every breath was controlled. Every run was flawless. It was identical to the album version. The album I produced. I knew every tiny imperfection, every subtle nuance I'd either fixed or left in for character. Hearing this note-for-note replication in a live setting sent a chill down my spine. No one is that perfect. Not while they're also dancing and engaging with a crowd. I started digging. I watched every live performance of hers I could find on YouTube. The audio was always a bit muddy, recorded on someone's phone, but the visual cues were there. Her mic technique was sloppy. Sometimes she'd pull the microphone away from her mouth mid-phrase, yet the vocal never wavered in the recording. Her breathing was inconsistent with the powerful notes she was supposedly belting out. Then I saw it. In a high-definition video from a local TV broadcast, a close-up caught a glimpse of a tiny, flesh-colored device nestled deep in her ear. An in-ear monitor, standard for performers. But I also noticed something else. The brand. It was a top-of-the-line model, known for its exceptional sound isolation and reliability. And it was the preferred brand of a company called Starlight Productions, the biggest live event production company in the region. The company that, according to the festival's sponsor list, handled all the major gigs in the city, including, I was willing to bet, Izzy's. This was it. The key. She wasn't singing. She was lip-syncing. She was a fraud, and her entire career was built on a lie I had helped create. She was using my work, my meticulously produced vocals, to build her empire while I was sleeping on a lumpy futon. The anger was so intense it almost made me dizzy. But then it was replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. I updated my resume that night. I scrubbed any mention of my studio resonance from it, instead highlighting my freelance work and my technical certifications. I emphasized my experience with digital audio networking, signal processing, and, most importantly, the specific mixing consoles and wireless systems that Starlight Productions used. I fabricated a story about my last studio client moving out of state, forcing me to seek more stable employment. It was a long shot. Starlight was the big leagues. I applied for an entry-level audio technician position, and I waited. For 2 agonizing weeks, I heard nothing. I was starting to lose hope when an email landed in my inbox. Interview request, Starlight Productions. My heart hammered against my ribs. I went in, spoke their language, talked about signal flow and gain staging, and pretended to be just another gearhead looking for a steady gig. I must have been convincing, or maybe they were just short-staffed, because a week later, I got the call. I was hired. I was in. My first day, they handed me a black polo shirt with a Starlight logo on it. I felt like a soldier being issued his uniform. My war was just beginning. Working for Starlight was a grind, but I welcomed it. It was anonymous, physical work. I was a roadie, a stagey hand, a grunt. I spent my days loading trucks, running miles of cable, and setting up speakers for corporate events, weddings, and small-time concerts. It was humbling, backbreaking labor, a universe away from the creative sanctum of my old studio. But every task, no matter how menial, was a step. Every piece of gear I learned to operate, every protocol I memorized, was another weapon in my arsenal. I kept my head down, my mouth shut, and made myself useful. I was reliable, I was punctual, and I never complained. In a world of transient, often flaky stage hands, that made me stand out. I learned the inner workings of the company, the hierarchy, the way crews were assigned. I made friends, or at least friendly acquaintances, with the other techs. I learned who was the best at lighting, who specialized in video, and most importantly, who the top audio engineers were and how they worked. I was playing the long game. My target was the annual Riverbend Festival, the city's biggest music event of the summer. It was 3 months away, and the headliner for the main stage on the final night had just been announced to Isabella Vance. The moment I saw the announcement, my blood ran cold and hot at the same time. This was my chance. A headlining spot at Riverbend was the biggest performance of her career. The show would be broadcast on local TV, streamed online, with thousands of people watching in person. Her coronation as the queen of the local music scene. It was the perfect stage for her downfall. My goal was simple: get assigned to her crew. To do that, I needed to be more than just a grunt. I needed to be at a soundboard. I started volunteering for more complex audio tasks, staying late to help the engineers break down their consoles, asking intelligent questions, and subtly showing off my knowledge. I proved I could handle pressure, troubleshoot problems on the fly, and mix a decent show for the smaller stage acts. I got promoted from a general stagehand to an A2 audio assistant. I was one step closer. The key to my plan wasn't just getting to the console, it was understanding her specific setup. I knew she was lip syncing, but I needed to know how. It had to be a sophisticated system. A simple backing track wouldn't be enough for a show of that scale. During a smaller theater gig she played a month before the festival, I managed to get myself assigned to the stage crew. While she was on stage singing her heart out, I had a job to do, but my eyes were everywhere. I watched her monitor engineer like a hawk, and I saw it. He wasn't just mixing her a little bit of her own live mic for show or the band. He was controlling a multi-track playback system running off a laptop. It wasn't just a stereo instrumental track, it was the full studio session. Every instrument, every backing vocal, and, most importantly, her lead vocal were on separate tracks. This allowed for a live mix, giving the illusion of a dynamic performance. The engineer could push the fader on the kick drum or the guitars just like a real show. And sitting right on top of the mix was the pristine, perfect, studio-recorded lead vocal track. My vocal track. The one I had spent weeks editing. That track was being fed directly and only into her custom-molded in-ear monitors. The live microphone she was holding. It was on, sure, but the fader for it was turned down to almost zero in the main house mix and her monitors. It was a prop. A very expensive prop. The final piece of the puzzle was the synchronization. The entire show, the lights, the video on the jumbotrons, and the playback was synced using timecode. A master clock that kept everything perfectly aligned. If you could interfere with that clock, even slightly, for just one channel, the whole illusion would crumble. My plan solidified. It was risky, requiring precision and a deep understanding of digital audio networking. I couldn't just cut the vocal track, that would be too obvious. She'd realize it immediately, and her monitor engineer would fix it in seconds. No, it had to be subtle. I had to make her think she was the one messing up. I needed to introduce a tiny, almost imperceptible amount of latency, a delay into the vocal track being fed to her ears. Not the main mix the audience was hearing, just her personal monitor mix. I'd start small, a few milliseconds, just enough to make her feel a little uneasy. Then I'd increase it slowly, methodically. Imagine trying to sing while hearing your own voice played back to you a fraction of a second later. It's one of the most disorienting things a performer can experience. It short-circuits the brain's feedback loop. You instinctively try to correct for the delay, you slow down, but the track keeps going at the right tempo. It would throw her off pitch, off timing. It would sound, to her and her alone, like she was losing control. The audience would hear the perfect studio vocal, but they'd see a singer on stage flailing, her lips moving out of sync with the words they were hearing. She wouldn't know what was real. And on the jumbotron, in glorious high definition, thousands would see the panic in her eyes as her perfect facade shattered. 2 weeks before the festival, the crew assignments were posted. I scanned the list, my breath caught in my chest. There it was. Riverbend Festival main stage. Audio. Monitor engineer Leo K. My boss had put me in for it. My hard work, my reliability, it had all paid off. He thought he was giving the new guy a shot at the big time. He had no idea he was handing me a loaded gun. The night before the show, I sat in my small apartment, running through the plan in my head for the 100th time. This was it. There was no turning back. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reclaiming the silence she had forced upon me and turning it into a deafening roar of truth. The day of the festival was a blur of organized chaos. The air buzzed with energy, the smell of food trucks, and the distant thud of a bass drum from a smaller stage. For me, it was all about focus. I was on autopilot, running cables, checking frequencies, setting up the monitor console. My station was tucked away on the side of the stage, a complex nexus of screens and faders that was my battlefield. Izzy and her band did a sound check early in the afternoon. She was in full diva mode, barely acknowledging the crew, speaking only to her manager and her monitor engineer me. "Make sure the vocals are crisp, Leo," she'd said, not even making eye contact. "I need to feel them." "You'll hear every detail, Izzy." "Crystal clear," I replied, my voice betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through my veins. During the sound check, I made sure her mix was perfect, pristine. I needed her to trust me. I needed her to be comfortable and confident when she stepped on stage for the real thing. As showtime approached, the crowd swelled, a sea of thousands of faces stretching out into the twilight. The opening acts had whipped them into a frenzy. This was the moment Izzy had been waiting for, the pinnacle of her local fame. Backstage, I could see her on a monitor, doing breathing exercises, getting into character as the humble, grateful artist. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. Her band took the stage to a roar from the audience. Then the lights dimmed and a single spot followed her as she walked to the center, microphone in hand, waving and smiling. The pre-recorded intro music, a track I also produced, swelled through the massive PA system. She looked like a star. She sounded like a star. I took a deep breath, my hand hovering over a small, unmarked dial on my console I had discreetly mapped to a digital latency plugin. A plugin that was routed only to a single channel, Izzy's lead vocal monitor send. The first song was one of her big hits, an upbeat, driving pop track. She nailed the performance, full of energy, her lips perfectly synced to the track blasting in her ears and out to the adoring crowd. I let her have that one. I wanted the contrast to be stark. The second song was a ballad. Slower, more emotional. It required nuance, control. This was my moment. As the first verse began, I gently turned the dial. Just 10 milliseconds of latency. To the human ear, it's almost nothing, but to a singer relying on audio feedback, it's a pebble in their shoe. I saw a flicker of confusion in her eyes on the monitor screen. She tilted her head slightly, a subtle sign of unease. She kept singing, or rather, miming. During the first chorus, I nudged the delay up to 25 milliseconds. Now it was noticeable. On the close-up shot on the Jumbotron, I saw her brow furrow. She pressed her in-ear monitor deeper into her ear, a look of frustration crossing her face. She thought the gear was failing. She was trying to compensate, pushing her timing, but she was fighting a ghost. The audience couldn't hear a thing wrong. The main mix was still flawless, but they could see the singer starting to unravel. By the second verse, I had the latency up to 50 milliseconds. A significant, maddening delay. Her performance became visibly strained. Her lips were now moving a split second after the words were heard, a bizarre, uncanny valley effect that was impossible to ignore on the massive screens flanking the stage. A murmur started to ripple through the front of the crowd. People were pointing, confusion on their faces. Izzy's professional smile was gone, replaced by a mask of sheer panic. She shot a furious look to the side of the stage, directly at me. I just looked back, my expression placid, as if I was trying to diagnose a technical problem. For the song's bridge, The big emotional crescendo, I gave the dial a final, vicious twist. 100 milliseconds. A tenth of a second of pure, disorienting chaos fed directly into her brain. That's when she completely lost it. She stopped moving her lips altogether for a second, her eyes wide with terror, even as her voice soared to a beautiful high note. Then she seemed to try and catch up, her mouth flapping desperately out of sync with the audio. It was a complete meltdown. She ripped the monitors from her ears and held the microphone to her mouth to sing for real, but she was so flustered, so far off the song's actual timing, that what came out was a shaky, off-key, breathless squawk. The pristine studio vocal track was still playing, creating a horrifying, discordant duet between the perfect singer on the recording and the floundering fraud on the stage. The crowd's murmuring turned into laughter and jeers. Someone shouted fake, and it was picked up like a chant. Her face, magnified 100 times on the screens, crumpled. She threw the microphone down, it clattered loudly, the one real sound she'd made all night, and ran off the stage. The perfect track played on for a few more seconds before her bewildered band trailed off into awkward silence. The aftermath was immediate and brutal. The next day, Isabella Vance's lip-sync disaster was everywhere. The local news, blogs, social media, it was a firestorm. My phone buzzed with texts from old friends in the music scene. "Did you see?" they asked. I played dumb. In the chaos, no one suspected sabotage. It was chalked up to a massive technical failure, but the damage to Izzy's brand of authenticity was irreparable. Starlight Productions issued a formal apology, and her career nosedived. Her label dropped her, the rest of her tour was cancelled, and she became a local punchline. I quit my job at Starlight a week later. I didn't feel elation, not really. I didn't feel guilty either. I just felt quiet. It was the satisfying, peaceful silence of a debt finally being paid. I used the money I'd saved to buy back a few key pieces of my old gear and started over, slowly, from my small apartment. It's not the studio I had, but it's a start. My name is still tarnished in some circles, but whispers are starting to circulate about what really happened that night on stage, about an audio engineer who got his own back. I don't know what the future holds, and maybe what I did was ethically questionable. But every time I sit down at my own small console, in my own space, I'm reminded that sometimes the only way to fight the noise is to control the silence. And for the first time in a long time, the silence sounds like victory. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like. We appreciate everyone and can't wait to bring more stories your way.